It is now my pleasure to introduce our final presenter and previous Genius Gala honoree, Martine Rothblatt.
Thank you, Paul. It's great to be here with all of you this evening. I'm honored to present our next Genius Award to Dr. Nicholas Schiff of Weill, Cornell. Dr. Schiff is an internationally recognized physician and scientist whose research in bridging basic neuroscience and clinical investigative studies of impaired consciousness and cognition following structural brain injuries is epic. Dr. Schiff's research involves deep brain electrical stimulation, a kind of pacemaker for the brain. Let's play the video.
Keeps blinking no. No to what?
We've tried questioning him. He's almost agitated himself into a coma.
How long will he live?
As long as any of us. Blast medicine, anyway. We've learned to tie into every human organ in the body except one. The brain. The brain is what life is all about. Now, that man can think any thought that we can. Love, hope, dream as much as we can. But he can't reach out, and no one can reach in.
In the United States, there are 5 million people who have had moderate to severe traumatic brain injuries who remain chronically cognitively impaired. Additionally, there are many who remain nearly unresponsive in states close to coma. What can be done, if anything, to help these patients? Considering that consciousness at its essence is an enigma, this work is even more challenging. Enter Dr. Nicholas Schiff, the Gerald B. Katz Professor of Neurology and Neuroscience at Weill Cornell Medical, an attending neurologist at New York Presbyterian Weill Cornell Medical Center in New York City.
I was entering my last year of residency, and I'll never forget the moment that I was looking down the roster and I saw the name of a patient that I had admitted when I was a first-year resident, a week or two into my residency. They were unresponsive. They were in what we would call a vegetative state, and what I was trained to understand was that was it. This was a permanent state. This was this person. This is where they were for the rest of their life. We went to see the person. She was awake. She was conscious. She was sitting in a solarium. She introduced herself to us. We chatted. And I remember just all sorts of feelings watching that process unfold and thinking, like, that shouldn't be. And I realized how viscerally I still was holding on to the beliefs of what I was told as a trainee. That kind of thing has repeated itself over and over and over in my career.
Dr. Schiff went on to found the Weill Cornell Medicine Consortium for the advanced study of brain injury. He and a small group of colleagues around the world have focused on this subject for over 30 years. Their findings, backed by scientific rigor, have shined a light on some stark realities.
In this group of patients that have been studied by the 6 clinical centers that's coming out, we found that in about 1 out of 4 cases, people who appear unresponsive at the bedside might be able to do very high-level cognitive work. That's a very large number of people.
Wow, 1 out of 4.
1 out of 4. You know, you can't unsee that, because that means go to any nursing home, go to any ICU. You know, 1 out of 4 people you think might not be aware, might be very highly aware. How can we just
That's so sobering.
I think
that's
so.
hard to deal with.
People are really uncomfortable about this. First off, I think it rightly freaks people out. No one wants to be in that situation. No one would want to think you could end up in a situation like that. And you'd sure want to believe that people who are smart enough to identify it and worry about it would find out and then do something about it.
Dr. Schiff and colleagues have been working tirelessly, often in an adversarial funding climate, to make headway on this problem and other disorders of consciousness, and they've been making impressive strides. In 2008, Dr. Schiff was named to the Time 100 for using a neurosurgical procedure called deep brain stimulation to help a minimally conscious patient regain the ability to communicate. And in 2023, he published a landmark trial of deep brain stimulation in patients who had partly recovered from a brain injury but suffered long-term cognitive deficits. His team implanted electrodes that precisely stimulated the central thalamus, an area that regulates alertness.
We recruited 6 patients into the study, and what we found is that in this group of people who were 23 to 60 years old, 4 to 18 years after their injury, several of them started to read. They were able to organize their lives. One person developed a degree program that they entered after 20 years of not going to school. What we saw was we could partially restore cognitive function in patients who had been brain injured with chronic cognitive impairment for moderate to severe brain injury for years, mostly decades. I mean, there's so little.
Yet this is could be so transformative.
I think it will
could be a pacemaker of the brain. Is that an accurate way to describe
this
it?
whole line of work will be transformative. This entire approach to structural brain injury, consciousness, and restoring it. This could be a pacemaker. This is a pacemaker for the brain. If it becomes a therapy, then it will be a general paradigm.
In addition to helping to connect neurons, Dr. Schiff also connects new ideas. During the pandemic, he worked with COVID-19 patients who took a long time to regain consciousness after ventilation. This is leading him to investigate whether oxygen deprivation plus ICU medications somehow triggered patterns of slower brain activity, and if that actually helped protect the brain. He's finding inspiration in an unlikely place, Central Park.
I ran across a paper that was titled the EEG, or the electroencephalogram of the anoxic turtle. And I thought, that's really interesting. What's that? And it turned out the anoxic turtle goes into a burst suppression pattern.
It's a turtle.
It's a turtle. It's like the ones in Central Park. I have my own pictures of them.
Okay.
I've taken a great interest in them now. And the painted turtle is actually the sort of the most studied and probably the champion of all of what are called the anoxia-tolerant vertebrates. But there are lines of evolutionary biology that have developed specializations of vertebrate animals to survive anoxic conditions.
Absence of oxygen.
Absence of oxygen. So the turtle will have no oxygen for 5 months, frozen in the ice in Central Park. And then the ice melts and it goes along. People have studied very carefully for about 40 years what happens on the front end of that process. It's a lot like ICU care, except that it happens inside the turtle's genome. So it starts with it getting cold outside, then genes start changing. But there's other stuff going on that's triggered by the drop in oxygen that actually changes what happens inside the neuron.
For his persistence on the road less taken, for creating hope in a field where little hope has been in the past, Dr. Schiff is a recipient of the 2024 LSC Genius Award.
Dr. Schiff, can you please join us on the stage?
Thank you. I'd like to thank Paul and the Liberty Science Center for this award. I'm really, truly honored to receive it. And I'd like to point out that all the work that you've heard about, the research that goes on these topics, is done by ensemble acts of scientists who are highly motivated, super energetic and skilled. And what we're really trying to do is shine light on the problems of people who have brain injury, their families, and the patients themselves are trying to really find a way to go forward. And this award hopefully will do something in that direction. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Schiff, and thank you, Martine. Appreciate it.